Good afternoon, dear guests, and a warm welcome. The academic procession has arrived. In the meantime, may I ask you to stand for their entrance? Thank you. Good afternoon, Sir Stephen Fry, Honorable Rector Sels, Your Excellencies, esteemed guests, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to bid you all a warm welcome to this special academic session to award an honorary doctorate to Sir Stephen Fry upon recommendation by the Faculty of Arts. Sir Stephen, if you would allow me to call you that, if for no other reason than it's such an alluring alliteration. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here today. And you were just given a musical welcome by the Hunt Masters of Arenberg. Sir Stephen Fry, ladies and gentlemen, is a man who, in many ways, is the full package. A British national treasure. An incredibly intelligent, brilliantly witty, and highly captivating individual. A jack of many trades and master of all. So Stephen, just a few days ago, you have been made a Knight Bachelor by King Charles at Windsor Castle. Today, KU Leuven honors you for your extraordinary accomplishments as a storyteller, for your carefully wrought contribution to the public debate on often delicate topics, and for your lifelong devotion to language, in which pursuit you most importantly emphasize the pleasure of language. If you allow me to quote you, let there be pleasure, let there be textural delight, let there be silken words and flinty words and soaking speeches Let there be language that oozes like a lake of lava. Words are your birthright. So if you've got it, use it. Just let the words fly from your lips and your pen. End of quote. I do believe we have quite a few words of praise for you planned today. Within a little bit, a ringing panegyric presented by Professor Geert Brône. We've also arranged a special musical intermezzo, not Beethoven's Final String Quartet, of which you are so enamored, but something entirely different. And we are also very excited that you will take a little time for a talk with Professor Pieter Vermeulen. But first, I would like to give the floor to the Dean of the Arts Faculty, Liesbet Heyvaert. Professor Heyvaert, if you please.
Honorable Rector, Sir Stephen Fry, Madam Ambassador, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and an honor to welcome you all on behalf of the colleagues and students of the Faculty of Arts, many of them present here today, on the occasion of our faculty awarding an honorary doctorate to Sir Stephen Fry. Of all the faculties of this sexcentenary university, the arts faculty is arguably the richest in terms of the sheer diversity of disciplines it hosts. This makes it without any doubt the best faculty in which to welcome Sir Stephen Fry as Doctor Honoris Causa. Our faculty's research and teaching are rooted in fundamental scientific curiosity and in a deep commitment to language, literature, art, history, and contemporary society. Sir Stephen Fry uniquely embodies that multiple identity, as well as many of the ideals and principles our faculty holds in high regard. The best clue for what is arguably the most obvious fit between Sir Stephen and us, the Faculty of Arts, is in our faculty's Dutch name, Faculteit Letteren. As the author of some 20 books in various genres and holder of a Cambridge Master's degree in English literature, Sir Stephen is of course very much a man of letters. But more to the point, he is in the truest sense of the word and in line with what letteren historically signifies, a philologist, a lover of language in all its beauty and versatility, and as such attuned to language as the tool that makes us human and at the same time also allows us to question what that might mean. Attuned to language as the tool for storytelling, magically introducing us to other worlds, minds, and times. Language as the tool for making fun of ourselves, yet another art in which Sir Stephen excels, the fine art of folly and silliness. What would the world be without it? Speaking of folly, it is worth recalling here that the physical home of the Leuven Arts Faculty is called the Erasmus House, after the author of, among other works, The Praise of Folly, much of it written as it happens in London, when Erasmus was visiting another English Sir Thomas More. Which brings us to history, another major discipline at our faculty. This too has inspired Sir Stephen to run the gamut from the silly to the serious. His unforgettable performances in Blackadder have done as much to instill both an interest in history and reservations about received history as any academic historian may hope for. As indeed did his alternate history novel, Writing History, in which, spoiler alert, he imagines a world actually worse off without Hitler in it. His more recent, magnificent literary reimaginations merge his love of language with his love of ancient history, so ancient that it only happened in the language of myth. These triumphs need no reminder here beyond admiring and grateful recognition. They will be celebrated comprehensively with the wider public tomorrow. Speaking of the wider public, universities worldwide, KU Leuven emphatically among them, increasingly call on their academics to reach out to the other-than-academic world, also known as the real world, to share what they know and, as importantly, identify what they don't know yet. The arts faculty is particularly proud to receive Sir Stephen among its community from that perspective too, because throughout his work, Sir Stephen has shown that graduates with degrees in art subjects are actually rather good at sharing a sound understanding of other scientific domains with non-academic mortals and at asking the right questions. Based on his critical intellectual curiosity and versatile rhetorical and literary talents, Sir Stephen has made unique contributions to the social and cultural debate, thereby appealing to multiple generations, as we will also witness in a video that will be shown in a few moments. The great authenticity Sir Stephen displays in all of this, critically searching, doubting, and wrestling with who he is and what is happening in the world, time and again touching base with scientific knowledge and emphasizing human solidarity and compassion, only deepens and strengthens the message he has been conveying throughout his various activities. Many of the themes he has drawn attention to are at the core of KU Leuven's identity and mission. Many of his initiatives serve the most vulnerable in society. He continues to raise delicate or controversial issues and tirelessly challenges taboos that still exist in public discourse. For all of these reasons, too, as a Faculty of Arts, we feel honored to welcome him as Honorary Doctor among us. Last Tuesday, it was already mentioned, Sir Stephen was knighted by King Charles III. On that occasion, the fledgling knight suggested that if this title would help his charity work, making him a duke would be even more impressive. Handing out dukedoms is unfortunately beyond our remit, and his venue may not altogether resemble Windsor Castle. But the conferment of an honorary doctorate, the highest academic honor, does ask for a memorable ceremony, and ceremonious this gathering will be. As a faculty, we also want to turn it into a true celebration, with music chosen especially for the occasion by our musicologists, with speeches, testimonials by our colleagues and students, and lots more. So let's turn this into a truly memorable Friday. Enjoy.
Thank you for your engaging introduction, Dean Liesbet Heyvaert. If I were to ask each of you here present, what exactly is it you like so much about Stephen Fry? I have no doubt that the answers would vary widely, and no two would be the same. In the next video, students and staff of this faculty share with us what Sir Stephen means to them and how he inspires them.
I love the way he speaks.
His advocacy for LGBTQ rights.
He makes culture more accessible to people.
He's also been involved in a lot of charity work.
Very intellectual, but also very approachable. And of course for all his literary achievements.
A Bit of Hannelore is an absolute masterpiece to my mind. As a PhD student in linguistics, I have a particular fondness about the linguist with his "hold the newsreader's nose squarely, waiter," or "friendly milk, cool countermine," my trousers.
I've tried to incorporate his work in my research and teaching a couple of times. And once I managed to sneak his work into an eye tracking experiment about language learning. And in that experiment, I used an episode of his documentary, Fry's Planet Word. And the episode was about swear words, about abusive language. And the humor of Stephen Fry caused participants to close their eyes during the experiment because they were smiling. And as a result, the eye tracking data sometimes failed. We had a lot of data loss. So that's a shame, but at least the participants enjoyed themselves. So.
Derek. That's the name of a man in a Fry and Laurie sketch. The man's last name is spelled Nippple-E. The source of humour is a source of inspiration for linguists as well, because it testifies to the arbitrary relation between form and meaning.
My book spells nipple. It does not spell... Have you gone mad?
What Fry and Laurie do is add another layer onto that, namely they also add non-verbal signs to that kind of meaning making. This is something that has also inspired linguists. But it took us another couple of decades after this sketch to find systematic ways of uncovering this kind of multimodality and studying it systematically. But this is something that you, Sir Stephen, were already onto back in the 1980s. Good on you.
He always tries to be on the right side of history, not only with his documentaries, but for example Out There, where he tries to convince his audience that there is nothing wrong with being gay, lesbian, transgender or anything, but he always tries to keep the middle ground.
As I moved through my teen years, I struggled with my identity quite a bit as a queer person, and Stephen Fry, also being queer, has inspired me to be myself more, has inspired me to explore that identity, and especially in the film Red, White and Royal Blue has caused me to look into him more, has caused me to also have a look at some of the interviews he has done, some of the documentaries, and that made me realize I relate with him.
It's all true, Grandpa. Nevertheless, I have directed Palace Communications to issue a firm denial of these accusations.
Dear Sir Fry, this is an authentic Flemish cobblestone. Over the centuries, it has supported the feet of many illustrious men and women here in Leuven, like Erasmus of Rotterdam, or Marguerite Lefebvre, our first female professor, or even the left foot of famous General Melchett during his victory parade in Flanders in 1918. A simple piece of rock becomes a relic when infused with memory, or a witness to history when wrapped in narrative. And that is exactly what you have demonstrated and continue to demonstrate throughout your impressive career. Thank you, Sir Fry, for showing us that true meaning does not reside in objects or facts by themselves, but rather in the stories we bestow upon them.
I grew up in a bilingual family. My mother speaks Dutch and my dad speaks English, but as a child I would really struggle to pick up English. And my dad would always play audiobooks narrated by Stephen Fry, and that was really the moment when I was drawn in by his voice, by his mastery of English, the beautiful words. I was kind of taught by Stephen Fry not to just desire the mastery of English, but also you have to savor it.
Say Fry, think Greek mythology. For indeed, Stephen Fry is world famous for his retellings of Greek myths. These retellings are well written, they can be enjoyed by everyone, they are full of sparkling, light-hearted humor. Even the footnotes, are a pleasure to read. And They are based on a very thorough knowledge of the material, including all the details. So, say Fry, think Odysseus, the most versatile among men. Say Fry, think Proteus, the most versatile among the gods.
Because of this book, I follow the course Greek religion and mythology here at KU Leuven. And it also inspired me to write. I mean, I always wanted to be a writer since I was like 11 or 12 years old. And it was about folklore and mythology. But since this book, it changed to stories about Greek mythology, and it meant so much to me. It has been with me since I was 12, so it's almost 11 years, I believe. And yeah, I cannot describe how much this book means to me.
The warm light of the dying afternoon sun fanned into a shimmering rainbow, which Pylades chose to interpret as a promise of good fortune.
Harry could not move a muscle. He lay there beneath the invisibility cloak, feeling the blood from his nose flow, hot and wet over his face.
What I brought is Stephen Fry's More From Me because this book got me out of the hospital. And the reason for that is 10 years ago in 2015, I had a hemorrhage in my brain, was rushed to hospital. And the first couple of days I couldn't do much at all. But afterwards, after a couple of days, I could read again. And this is a book I was reading. What I did not know is that the nurse observed this and talked to the doctor and said I was ready to be dismissed to go home because I was reading big, serious books in English.
I was inspired by his effortlessly intriguing and comprehensible way of writing about poetry and rhyme and meter. And it made me want to write poetry simply for the pleasure of being and allowing myself to be in these unexplored forms and also in these unfathomable times. I felt that throughout his explanation that he knew poetry in the way it wants to be known, so for its creative freedom to be and to say whatever he wants to say without any need for justification. So I think he made me a little bit braver by doing that.
Stephen Fry inspired me to read new books and to see new movies, and even movies or books that I normally wouldn't consider reading or seeing. For example, his book The Stars Tennis Balls made me familiar with the story of the Count of Monte Cristo. I have a favorite sentence just because it's a typical form of Stephen Fry's humor with language. A couple of hours after this distressing scene, Pete knocked on my door with a cup of tea. Precision, Portia, precision. He knocked on my door with his knuckles, but you know what I mean.
I believe poetry is a primal impulse within us all. I believe we are all capable of it, and furthermore, that a small, often ignored corner of us positively yearns to try it.
There is nothing very appealing about show business memoirs. A linear chronology of successes, failures and blind ventures into new fields is dull enough.
I would like to say thank you, Mr. Fry.
Thank you so much for everything you've done.
Your humor has played an important role in my life.
And therefore I want to thank you.
Hi Stephen, thank you for writing Mythos.
I wish you many prosperous years to come, Sir Fry.
Thank you very much for all the joy that you've brought us, but also for all the wisdom and for all the beauty that you've brought us. So Stephen, will you play?
Joy, wisdom and beauty, those are words from the heart. Thank you to everyone who helped make this video. The floor is now open to Professor Geert Brône, who will deliver the laudatory speech for Sir Stephen Fry. And afterwards, Rector Luc Sels will award the Honorary Doctorate. But first, please welcome Professor Geert Brône.
Honorable Rector, Your Excellencies, Sir Stephen, ladies and gentlemen. What a privilege it is to stand here today to celebrate the remarkable contributions of one of the most distinguished and multifaceted actors, writers and broadcasters of our time, Sir Stephen Fry. Often described as a true Renaissance man, a polymath, and maybe most importantly, a doer of good works, Sir Stephen has, for nearly 5 decades now, pursued and displayed his talents and interests across the board. Fueled by his critical intellectual curiosity and his unsurpassed literary talents, he has made a unique contribution to public and cultural debate on a variety of topics and using a variety of platforms. One might think that presenting a laudatory speech for a man who has left such a massive creative and intellectual footprint would be a relatively easy task. Well, it's not. In preparing this short speech, I came to realize that however eloquent or witty I attempt to be in highlighting his many qualities and achievements, Sir Stephen would, famous as he is for being so exceptionally virtuosic and ludic with language, inevitably do a far better job at it. Any attempt on my part to reach a point where the words, as he himself once put it, seduce, charm, excite, please, affirm and tickle those who are listening, would be guaranteed to fail miserably. For that reason, instead, I will adhere to the style and traditions of academic celebrations. But rest assured, Sir Stephen, we did our best not to turn this speech and this event into a, to borrow one of your hilarious phrases, an arse-numbingly boring academic event. Coming back to the epithet of Renaissance man that is so often used to characterize Sir Stephen, he himself once described his general approach to his life and career as follows, using a metaphor that speaks directly to many colleagues of the Faculty of Arts at our beloved university. And I quote, "We are not nouns, we are verbs. I'm not a thing, an actor, a writer. I am a person who does things. I write, I act, and I never know what I'm going to do next. I think you can be imprisoned if you think of yourself as a noun." End of quote. In what follows, I would like to focus on 4 verbs that together provide the motivation for awarding the honorary doctorate degree to Sir Stephen Fry. To narrate, to resonate, to engage, and to marvel. To narrate. Sir Stephen is widely recognized as a master of storytelling, an exceptional skill that he has applied in many of his endeavors, from his autobiographical novels, his podcast productions and audiobooks, to the recent adaptations of the Greek myths. What characterizes his narrative style is the combination of eloquence, wit, and an effortless blend of humor and intellect. In preparing for this academic event, we in fact invited students and staff of our faculty to reflect on the ways in which the work of Sir Stephen has inspired, amazed, amused, and touched them, a selection of which we just saw in the video. Among the most frequent answers was his ability to blend complex ideas with engaging storytelling, making even the most intricate subjects accessible and entertaining. To take the example of the 4 volumes of the retellings of the classics that he published between 2017 and 2024, it is striking how he has managed to both impress card-carrying classicists, we have just seen one such a specimen in the video, our colleague and co-promoter of this honorary doctorate, Geert, and to attract a broad readership, both young and old. The professionals applaud him for the fact that the books display a thorough familiarity with the original materials and alternative versions, while at the same time using his own unique voice to portray the gods and heroes in the stories. It is this unique narrative voice which creates a rich tapestry by combining wit with wisdom, familiar with fresh perspectives, that brings these ancient myths to life for modern readers. And if you allow me to share a personal anecdote, one such modern reader is here today. My own son, who is hiding somewhere in the back rows of the auditorium today, he can testify that how he, as a 12-year-old, was drawn into the stories of mythos from the very first pages, in which chaos, the mythological state preceding the creation of the cosmos, is compared to, and you can guess, a teenager's bedroom. After that, he, like millions of others, devoured the books of Sir Stephen, the modern-day mythographer whose stories resonate with an incredibly diverse audience. And this brings me to the second verb, to resonate. Sir Stephen, the actor, has a voice that resonates, both literally and figuratively. Arguably, one of the most distinctive features of Sir Stephen's acting performance is his exceptional command of the English language, which he has displayed in sitcoms, television series, feature films, and as a voice actor for audiobooks and animated films. Running through the numerous characters that he has portrayed over the past decades is one constant, and that is the importance of language in bringing these characters to life. Or as he himself put it was always language for me. Starting off at the now famous Cambridge Footlights, the student comedy society at the university, he gained early television success in comedy with series such as A Bit of Fry and Laurie, Jeeves and Wooster, and of course Blackadder, with the legendary incarnations of the mischievous character Lord Melchett. Apart from his work as a comedy actor, he has earned accolades as an actor in a broad range of movie and television productions. Arguably most memorable is his portrayal of Oscar Wilde in the 1997 movie Wilde, a role which he seemed to be destined to take on, born to be wild, so to speak, and for which he was nominated for the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor. Again, when we invited students and staff of our faculty to reflect on how Sir Stephen has been inspirational for their work and life, the link with Oscar Wilde is present in a significant number of testimonials. Other titles that feature in these testimonials and that have touched, inspired, and generally entertained many of our staff and students are the movies Gosford Park, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, V is for Vendetta, Sherlock Holmes, and The Hobbit, alongside the audiobooks of the Harry Potter series, to which he lends his voice. One recent movie production that stands out, however, is Treasure, a movie based on the novel Too Many Men by Lily Brett. In this movie, which tells the story of generational trauma and the intergenerational legacy of the Holocaust, Sir Stephen portrays a New York-based Polish-Jewish Holocaust survivor. And so as to provide an authentic interpretation of this character, he turned his hand to learning Polish for the role, much to the admiration of all, including our own colleagues in Slavic Studies at the Faculty of Arts here in Leuven. This example of full commitment to or engagement in a movie role leads me to the third verb, to engage. Next to his engagement in the portrayal of characters as an actor or the telling of engaging stories, Sir Stephen has engaged in public debate on a large variety of topics. For many years, he has put a spotlight on themes that are at the very heart of the human condition and manages to systematically use his international fame and the attention he generates with it to raise difficult, sensitive, or controversial issues. Many of his initiatives serve the vulnerable in society and help to break social taboos, including sexuality and LGBTQ+ rights, mental problems, and childhood trauma. Being the verb that he is, Sir Stephen engages with these topics in just about everything he does, whether it is in his autobiographical writings, such as Moab is My Washpot or the Fry Chronicles, his acting, again, think of Oscar Wilde and Treasure, his work as a broadcaster, for example, in the TV documentaries Stephen Fry Out There and Stephen Fry, The Secret Life of the Manic Depressive. What stands out throughout all of this is the great authenticity that he displays, critically searching, doubting and struggling with who he is and what is happening in the world, but also repeatedly returning to scientific evidence and human solidarity and compassion, which only deepens and strengthens his message. Next to his engagement in public debate and his unique ability to package all important messages in creative formats, his strong commitment to these topics is also reflected in the numerous charitable causes in which he has been actively involved, including Mind, a UK mental health charity, Comic Relief, a charity focused on tackling poverty and social injustice, and the National Literacy Trust, promoting literacy for disadvantaged children and adults, to name just a few. It was exactly for this charity work and services to raising mental health awareness that Sir Stephen only very recently received a knighthood in the United Kingdom. While all of these examples testify to Sir Stephen's status as a champion of public engagement, he also deserves to be praised as a champion of intellectual curiosity. And here is our fourth and final verb, to marvel. He never ceases to marvel at a great many things, whether it's the creativity and ingenuity of our own species, the power of language and storytelling, the potential of technology, nature's glorious wildness, to even the engineering of a ballpoint pen. This brings us to a less commonly celebrated but equally significant facet of his work, namely his outstanding contributions to science popularization. So Stephen embodies the spirit of intellectual curiosity and lifelong learning, a core value that we hold dear at our university. He has inspired generations to embrace knowledge, question assumptions, and find joy in discovery. In many of his media endeavors, he has made science, technology, and the wonders of the natural world, but also the wonders of words, accessible to millions. In his role as the host of the beloved television quiz QI, he introduced audiences to fascinating and often fun facts, debunked common myths, and fostered a deep appreciation for knowledge and reason. With his warm wit, sharp intellect, and insatiable curiosity, he turned complex scientific ideas into engaging, digestible narratives that delighted and enlightened viewers of all ages and across many nations. Beyond QI, Sir Stephen has used his voice in numerous ways to promote scientific thought and critical thinking in a world that is flooded with fake news. His books, interviews, podcast appearances, and public talks frequently explore themes of rationality and empiricism, artificial intelligence, and the philosophy of science. To name just a few examples that have reached a wide audience, the Shannon Luminary lecture that he gave in 2017 on the topic The Future of Humanity and Technology, his debate with that other famous Steven Pinker, on Enlightenment Today, or his podcast series Great Leap Years, in which he explores the stories behind great inventions. Whether discussing the intricacies of the human brain, the implications of technological advancement, or the importance of evidence-based thinking, Sir Stephen approaches each subject with clarity, infectious enthusiasm, and scientifically sound understanding. For all of these contributions, Sir Stephen, we express our deepest respect and gratitude. We urge you to continue to be a verb and never stop narrating, resonating, engaging and marveling. Om al deze redenen, meneer de rector, verzoek ik u op voordracht van de Academische Raad het eredoctoraat van KU Leuven te verlenen aan Sir Stephen Fry.
Sir Stephen Fry, KU Leuven is honoring you for your exemplary command of storytelling, displayed in your literary work, ranging from personal memoirs over fictional explorations of the human condition to accessible and witty retellings of the Greek myths. For your thoughtful contribution to public debates on a multitude of often sensitive or controversial topics, and your continued active commitment to a plethora of charitable initiatives related to these topics. For your lifelong dedication to language, reflected throughout your work as an actor, writer and broadcaster, and rooted in a genuine appreciation for the beauty versatility, and power of words. For your contribution to science communication, promoting scientific understanding through your ability to unlock complex insights for a wide audience in an engaging manner, championing the importance of healthy skepticism and evidence-based thinking. For these reasons, I hereby bestow upon you, in my capacity as Rector of KU Leuven, and upon the recommendation of the Academic Council, the degree of Doctor Honoris Causa of this university. My sincere congratulations. And this is the Latin version that we provided in the maybe you can show the Latin version to the family.
Thank you. Oh my goodness me. Professoren, Studenten, Docenten, Damen und Herren, wat ein großer Ehr. Ik dank u allen uit de gronden van mijn hart. I will stick to English from now on. This has been extraordinary. I feel as if I've spent the last half hour having honey poured all over me and then had a dead rabbit affixed to my shoulder. This is not usual, but it's been an unusual week. It is a very extraordinary thing to sit and listen to these descriptions of oneself, which I still find very hard to connect to the person I am inside this all too solid human casing. It's not modesty, it's just a genuine disconnect, because, like all of us, I think, inside me there is a 15-year-old who is still uncertain, still afraid, still unsure what this world he was born into without asking is really all about, and what his role in it might be. And so hearing of all these apparent achievements and qualities that have been so kindly connected to me, I remember a very young version of myself, and this is not a plea for sympathy, but I was, like many British people of my, I have to use the word, my class, I suppose. I was sent away to boarding school when I was 7 years old, a boarding school 200 miles from home. It may sound rather cruel, and to some people it does sound cruel to send a 7-year-old child away from their parents. But you have to remember, of course, when you think about it clearly, that if you grow up in a world where this is normal, you think it's normal. Take a child, a baby, once they're able to walk, put them in a cupboard and lock them there every Thursday, and at 3 o'clock, put in a jar of honey, and then at 4 o'clock, hit them with a newspaper, and do it every Thursday. The child will just think that's what happens on Thursdays. It's not unusual, that's what happens. Send a child away to a strange school 200 miles from home, in the company then when he gets to the school of other children the same age, and a little bit older of course. You just think, this is the way the world is. So I'm not complaining about the fact that I was sent away from home, but I had to do something that we all have to do, and I had to do it in the extreme conditions of a school like that, is I had to fit in. I had to belong. I had to feel, even at 7 years old, in some way accepted and popular. It's a big word, popular. It's not often really used and recognized for what it means to young people to be popular, or more importantly, how terribly it means something to be unpopular. And I realized very quickly that I was going to be massively unpopular. Not because of any attribute, but quite the opposite. I couldn't do anything worth doing. The first thing in a boys' school that is worth doing is sport. I was one of those people, you know, if you throw a ball at me, I would, like that, instead of a graceful taking of the weight. If I couldn't run in a straight line, I would collide with a tree. I would trip over the white lines on a tennis court. The words that were shouted at me, you can imagine. So it was clear that I was never going to be popular for the reason most boys were popular, sport. I couldn't be athletic. I couldn't sing. I say to people I can't sing, nobody believes it. They will say, oh, everybody can sing, but I can prove, actually, that I can't sing. I'm not going to prove that I can't sing by singing to you now. I can prove even more authoritatively. I was at a funeral about, it must be about 15 years ago now, of the film director, John Schlesinger, made a number of great films, Midnight Cowboy and so on, Marathon Man, quite famous. But that's not the point. There was singing, and I did what I always do. I mimed. I just moved my mouth. I didn't make any noise, because I didn't want to upset the people next to me, especially because the person to my left was Paul McCartney. And anyway, after the second hymn or song that we had to sing at this funeral, he whispered to me, he said, Stephen, you're not singing. Why aren't you singing? You should be singing. I said, Paul, I can't sing. He said, everybody can sing. Sing. So for the next one, I started to sing. And after one line, he turned to me, you're right, you can't sing, shut up. So that's proof that I can't sing. So I couldn't sing, I couldn't move properly, I couldn't play a musical instrument, I couldn't draw, I couldn't paint. There was nothing I had to offer the school that would make me other than an unnoticed worm. Just the lowest of the low in the pecking order, the cruel pecking order of boys at a school in the 1960s. And it was a cruel world. And there was a certain amount of self-pity for me, of course. I felt sorry for me, nobody else did, but it was a sort of awful weight, like I say, we would now call it cortisol or adrenaline, leaking into the stomach like hot lead every morning that I woke up. There's another day, and no one is going to like me, and I'll just shuffle around as a nobody. It's an awful thing to describe, and it was an awful thing to experience. But weirdly, after the second week at that school, while I was feeling like that, and really prepared to run away, the music teacher came in and wrote up on the blackboard the word orchestra. It was obvious there was going to be a lesson about the sections of the orchestra, brass, woodwind, and so on. But I, without being able to control myself, just squeaked out the word cart horse, which is a type of horse. You have cart horses. The horse that pulls the cart is a cart horse. Teacher said, "What? Shut up, Fry, what are you talking about?" I said, "No, it's cart horse." And for some reason in my mind, the letters of orchestra had rearranged themselves into the word cart horse. Perfectly simple for all of you to see that that's just what we call an anagram. I didn't know the word then, of course. It's really very straightforward and nothing particularly exciting about it. It's a thing people do in crosswords and for fun. They make up, I'm sure there are many interesting Flemish, Vlaams, anagrams of one word into another or one whole sentence into another. In fact, later in life, I did find it a useful thing as a sort of gift you can give people. I was lucky enough to know the great English actor Alec Guinness, whom some of you may know as Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars films. And he was a very fine actor. And we would have lunch occasionally at the Connaught in London. And I arrived late for one of them. It wasn't my fault, but he was very much of the generation where lateness was not an acceptable vice. And he'd been doing the crossword. And he said, as a punishment, you have to finish the crossword. So I sort of finished. And he said, you're very good at the anagrams, because some of the clues were anagrams. I said, well, I've always, for some reason, seen letters rearrange themselves in that way. "Oh," I said, "your name, Alec Guinness. I've suddenly seen there's a very good anagram of that." He said, "I hope it's not the same that you gave Alan Bates." There's an actor called Alan Bates, you may remember from films, and I used to call Alan Bates Anal Beast. So I said, no, yours is really extraordinary. Your name is an anagram of genuine class. And he looked and he wrote it down. He said, "My God, it is. I shall remember you in my will." Which meant rather a lot, because they didn't have enough money when they made the first Star Wars movie to pay him, so he agreed to take 1% of Star Wars, and they were so grateful that just after they finished shooting, they offered him another percent, so he had 2%. So of the whole Star Wars enterprise, and so he died being worth over £100 million, but he didn't remember me in his will. Which actually reminds me, I was very fortunate in the 80s to get to know Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple Computers, and he was a remarkable man to know, as you can imagine. Quite tricky, because he was very, very, very certain in his opinions, or at least he could change his mind, but he was a frightening presence in some ways. And we were chatting about something in this room, and one of his new products was coming out, one of the laptop machines, if you're old enough to remember those kind of apricot-coloured clamshell MacBooks, beautiful iMac books. And I said, "Laptop machines are very interesting." He said, "Duh." I said, no, laptop machines, the words are very interesting. He said, "How come?" And so I wrote up laptop machines on this whiteboard, with a marker, and I said, can you see? It's an absolute anagram of Apple Macintosh. He said, and so I pulled the letters out and showed that it is, no letter spare, no letter used twice, etc., etc. He said, "You're fucking weird." And that's, to go back to the school, that's what I thought. I'm weird, I can see, but the teacher actually, to give him credit, kept me in afterwards and said, "Can you do this with other words?" And he showed me his name, and I made up silly sentences from his name and things like that. And he took a sort of vague interest in me and pushed me along to the Latin teacher, who said I could start Latin earlier because I clearly liked language. And then I learned ancient Greek, and I was so thrilled, Geert, by your use of the word marvel, because I had this marvelous moment, literally. You're learning a language like Greek. The exciting thing when you're a child is that it's a code. You've got special characters to work with. And one of the things that excited me too is that words used in English come from Greek words, and you think it's a kind of magic little, I don't know, a sort of reciprocal thing that happens, and it's very exciting. And this book that he gave me to learn would teach one all the connections between Greek words and English words. And so if you had phoneme and grapheme, you remember them from telephone and telegram, and tele being distant or remote, or at a distance, telegram, writing at a distance. I really thought that's really cool. And then I got to chapter 4, and there was a new verb to learn, thaumazo. And it said, "This is easily remembered by thinking of the English word thaumaturge." And of course, I have never forgotten it. But thaumazo, as it happened, means to marvel or to wonder. And a thaumaturge is a worker of wonders. So anyway, that was my little thing. I had language, and I thought I was good at it. And I realized it was a way out from being bullied and from being kept lonely. I could tell stories with it in the dormitories at night when the teachers had gone and, we're supposed to be asleep. I would tell stories of blood and ghosts and things like that obviously all boys love, and I would tease people, make up nicknames for them, anagrams for their names and so on, and also found a very good way of not being bullied. You use what passes for your wit at that age to stop being bullied. If anybody knows a child being bullied, or I can give you the guaranteed Fry solution. It only works for men. You'll see why for boys. So the bully comes up to you and raises a fist. You say, no, don't hit me. I'll get an erection. Oh, and off they go. So that works very well. So I made the sort of terrible mistake of thinking that I was in some ways a lord of language because I was slightly better at it than the others. Because the others were good at all the other things. I mean, the only reason really that it seemed that language filled my every sentence, well, obviously it filled my every sentence. It filled my every waking thought and my every dreaming vision was words, as Hamlet puts it. Because it wasn't filled with cricket and rugby and football and anything else. And I noticed the oddity. Can you imagine someone who can play the piano fluently, who never does, or only just does a few things on it? Or somebody who can paint realistically with absolute beauty like a Vermeer, but only does a few sketches of stickmen? You would think they were insane to have this gift and not use it. And that's what I thought of everyone around me. They had language, but all they did with it was say, pass the mustard, go away, shut up, I hate you. And that was it, like little stick drawings, when in fact language can do so much more. It can, as we were saying, it can beguile and dazzle and seduce and charm and create a thrill in the other person. Because when you speak, you are using language. But when you use it to someone, they are using language. You now are all using language as much as I am. I'm not using it any more than you are. Your brain is processing my words, and that is an act of language. So we are doing it together. It's a magnificent experience at all times. And to be aware of it is to be aware of your power, your extraordinary power. And I, in a small way, was like that at school. But then I came in for a huge shock. One day I was at home. It was a rainy day. I turned the television on. We only had a tiny television, but like this. My father didn't really approve. And there was a film on. It was a colour film, but it was a black and white television. So it gave me no real hint as to what it was. I knew it was set in the past. It wasn't Shakespeare. I couldn't quite work it out. And it wasn't a sort of Jane Austen romance. But the language in it was the most extraordinary thing I had ever heard. And there was one moment, I don't know how this will work on Flemish ears, but it was extraordinary on mine, where a young man kneels in front of a beautiful young girl and says, I hope I will not offend you if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection. And it was as if I'd been hit by a sandbag. I thought, wow, you can do that with language. Oh my God. The film ended and I ran to my mother and I said, Mummy, I hope I will not offend you if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection. She said, what are you talking about? And I explained that I'd seen this. And she said, oh, I know what that is. She said, that's The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. I said, I've got to know more about it. So I went to the library and I got hold of the comedies of Oscar Wilde and I read The Importance of Being Earnest till I knew it off by heart. Every part of it, like my brother was doing the same, but he was doing it with a Pink Floyd album. He was learning the lyrics. And, you know, when you're that age, that's what happens. You absorb thrillingly. It could be football statistics. It could be anything. But with me, it was this Oscar Wilde and his use of language. I'd never heard anything like it. And it propelled me, almost by accident, to find out more about this man. So I went back to the library and I found a book called The Trials of Oscar Wilde. And I discovered that this extraordinary figure who attracted this amazing group of other remarkable poets, writers, painters, wits, also had a fall, a terrible, terrible fall. He was put on trial for what was called in those days, or was called by his lover, Lord Alfred Douglas, the love that dare not speak its name. He was a gay man, a queer man, as we would say now. And he was sent to prison for 2 years, hard labor. Not a sentence a man of his class and background was expected to survive, but he did survive it, but not for very long. He died in Paris in 1900, at the age of 46. And as I read this changed everything for me, because this lord of language, this prince of prose, I saw also shared something with me that I'd never quite dared address. We'd now say sexuality, and the word he used, I think perhaps maybe a better word. He called it his nature. I saw my nature was the same as his nature. And I was suddenly terrified. Having got a bit of confidence, I was back to that 7-year-old again, terribly scared, because I knew from newspapers, from the talk in the playground, from the sneers that you heard from other boys, that people like that were destined for shame and disgrace and imprisonment and exile. and misery and loneliness and unhappiness. So suddenly that was going to be my life. But again, language rescued me, because I thought, well, I've got to find out more about this Oscar Wilde, and the only way I could was to use what passed for the internet in those days, a library, an actual library, the big library in the nearest city. And I went to the big city and I read more about Oscar Wilde, and I read about his friends, and I read about friends about friends about friends, and the ripples went outwards and outwards into the whole nation of queer writers and artists and statesmen and warriors. But then beyond them, I was captivated by their lives, the lives of artists, the lives of people who were different, not necessarily queer, but just different. The heretics and the madmen, as someone once called those who really changed the world. Wilde put it another way, and it's similar to the way that was described about me, about never wanting to be a noun and always wanting to be a verb. And he called it the dynamic life. He said, if you know what you want to be in life, whether it's a grocer or a judge or a general or whatever it might be, you will become it. That is your punishment. But if you have no idea who you are, if you have to try and reinvent yourself every day, if you go on an adventure trying different fruits of different trees, of different orchards in all the world, that is your reward. You will be an artist. It will be a dynamic life, not a static life. And that's the life that Oscar lived. It's the life that students live, sometimes just for a short time. So what I'd say to the students here is become a permanent student. Just because you happen to leave the walls of this glorious ancient town and university doesn't mean you have to forget being a student. You don't have to forget being a lunatic and a heretic and a doubter and a wanderer and an explorer, and someone who can do it, as all humans can, with the great gift of language. It's a marvelous thing to be alive if you fight that fight with the world that wants you to calm down, that wants to control you, that wants to give you answers. You should look only for questions, of course, because they're much more exciting. Listen, I could go on forever because I'm so thrilled to be here and so extraordinarily honored by the kindness you've shown me. And I regard it as really important for one reason that I'll leave with you, and that is that I happen to go to a university in England, Cambridge, which is also a very old, actually rather older than this one, but never mind. And the college I was at, because it's a collegiate system, was called Queen's College. And in your matriculation, there's a marvelous old medieval dining hall where you go, and there are portraits all over of the queens who founded it back in, whatever, 1200 and something. And there was a man in a slight sort of fur, rather marvelous Holbein-style portrait. And I remember turning to one of the academics who was sitting there saying, and who's that? Was he one of the masters of the college, one of the presidents of the college? He said, no. He said, don't you recognize him? That's Desiderius Erasmus. He was at this college. And of course, he was at this college. And who was Erasmus? He was sometimes called the crowning glory of Christian humanism. He was the one whose life happened to coincide, as ours is doing, with an enormous technological revolution, which is to say, the printing press of Johannes Gutenberg, 1450. And then an enormous political, ideological upheaval of unbelievable violence and power, which was the proclamation in Wittenberg by Martin Luther in 1515. And Erasmus saw all this. He saw what the technology could do. And he could see what the power of the spreading word of a new ideology could do. He was a Catholic, and in a sense a good Catholic. But he recognized the corruptions of the Catholic Church just as Luther had done, the sales of indulgences and so forth, and the corruptions of the monks, the monasteries, and the priests and the bishops. The whole hierarchy of the Church was not flawless by any means. But then he also watched in horror as Protestantism took on its own terrible dogmas and terrible intolerances, its anti-Semitism, its hideous wars amongst themselves, let alone then the wars against the Catholics. He saw this all happening, and he pleaded for people to cast away certainty, not cast away doubt, cast away certainty. Be unsure. and his book, In Praise of Folly, as mentioned, urges us to remember who we are as human beings. Whoever we are, however we're born, whatever graces and attributes are given to us by nature or God, we are the same stuff, and we're on a journey of questioning, and we don't know, and we aren't sure, and that person who seems to be an enemy might teach us something, and we might teach them something, but only if we allow each other to listen. It's very hard to do when violence of opinion so clearly leads to violence of action. We live at a time when we're very scared that there will be blood on the pavements and broken bones here in this city, in London, in Paris, in Berlin, in places where we've never known really such things except for the odd recrudescence of violence. So this is a time when Erasmus should be attended to, and we should listen to his lesson that only when we understand our folly can be wise, and only when we reason with our unreason can we be clever. So thank you all very, very much indeed, and please believe me when I tell you how much this means to me. Dank u wel.
Thank you very much, Sir Stephen. Your love of language is indeed infectious. Now, let's move on from the power of language to the power of music. And to that end, we have invited Hannelore, Valentin and Benjamin Macke. Hannelore plays the Flemish bagpipe and Benjamin the diatonic accordion and the foot bass. And first, they will play Polska Erlinda. It's a popular traditional dance tune from Sweden, followed by Jack Layton, and that's a Baroque tune from Northumberland in the UK. It's a delight to listen and to dance to, should you be so inclined. Please welcome Hannelore, Valentin and Benjamin Macke. Thank you so much, Hannelore, Valentin and Benjamin Macke. An academic session like this one is inevitably accompanied by a great many speeches. But we felt a little talk with our spanking new Doctor Honoris Causa wouldn't go amiss. Talk host on duty is Peter Vermeulen, Professor of American Literature. He grew up in the 90s on an intensive diet of blackadder. And he is not at all intimidated by the fact that he now has the opportunity to speak to one of his childhood heroes. Professor Vermeulen and Sir Stephen, if you could please join me.
Sir Stephen.
Please, don't
Oh, no. Sir is fine. I'll stick to Sir, which is even more awkward, but that'll work, you know. So also on my behalf, congratulations on this great award and on a speech that I think was more entertaining than we would normally tolerate in a setting like this, but I'm sure we all enjoyed. The idea of this short conversation is not that I will ask my own questions, it's that I will relay the questions that we have harvested from our students and colleagues who were smart enough not to feature in
harvested sounds so biological, doesn't
well, it was hard work, but they're smart people, and they had good questions. And many of the questions, and this is the first one I'll throw at you, had to do with not just your love of language, which we talked about, but also your clear investment in the act of writing. You spend a lot of your time in the last 30 years writing. And also personally, when I read one of your autobiographies, there was a lot of celebrity, there was a lot of champagne, there was a lot of coke, but there was also many moments where you self-isolated to write what was then your first novel. There must have been many moments like that since then, given your enormous productivity. For most of our students and colleagues, and for me, writing is painful and something to be avoided and something we would never do if we were celebrities. But you don't seem to suffer so much from it. So I wonder if you can talk about that, how you have maintained the joy or the pleasure in writing?
Well, I'll start with a story. I was lucky enough towards the end of his life to know the great artist Francis Bacon, Irish London artist, painter. And he would hang around in some of the bars of Soho quite often. He was famous for his capacity to drink. And I was in such a bar one evening, and the owner was locking the door to show that he was happy for us all to stay. It was myself and Francis Bacon and a couple of artists called Gilbert and George and an art critic. It was a group of artists, to be honest. And when 3 o'clock came, I sort of looked at my watch. I said, "I'm sorry, I've got to go." And the other two artists said, "Oh, don't be an arse, go on, stay. We're drinking, come on. We'll go till 6 in the morning." I said, no. I've got work to do, and I'm writing something, and I just want to go home like that. And Francis Bacon said to me, he said, "You've got a little man, haven't you?" And I said, "No, I'm single," as I was at the time. He said, "No, I don't mean that. I mean in here, you've got a little man who tells you when to stop drinking and to start working." He said, "I've got that little man," he said. And it's famous. Bacon was famous for the fact that he'd go on these benders, as we call them, these big drinking sprees, and then he would stop and he'd go to his studio and he'd work 4 months, solid, just never, just only sleeping and drinking coffee and just working and making paintings. And he said, if I didn't have a little man, I would have been dead 20 years ago. I knew a lot of people in Soho, a lot of artists, photographers who were as talented as I was. They didn't have the little man to tell them to go home. The little man to say, work now. And I've always had that little man. I don't know why. Call it guilt. I don't know. Okay. It may be guilt. Guilt can be a handy thing. Mm-hmm. It drives you on, this sense that you've always got to prove yourself. Thomas Mann, the German novelist, he said a writer is just an ordinary person who finds writing more difficult than other people. Okay. Now that sounds paradoxical. Surely they find it easier. No. The whole point is everything you've said about how difficult writing is true. Okay. Take the average person who thinks they have a novel inside them, right? And as most novelists say, that's where it should remain. But you know, everybody has a feeling they could write a novel, and most people, probably even everybody in this room, might have once started to write a book, a novel. They were at chapter 1, and they've had this idea, and they write it, and the first chapter comes out really well. And they're like, oh my God, this is great, I'm a writer, it's amazing. And then chapter 2 starts, and then suddenly the second page of chapter 2, bang! What? And then all the questions arise, all the difficult, almost cinematic questions. How do I get her out of the room and to go to the restaurant where she has to go to hear that news? Do I have to follow her out of the building, into the taxi, all the way, or can I just cut to her? How does that work? Oh, what do I do? Anyway, I don't know what to do here. And they pace up and down and they stare at the screen or they stare at the paper. And then eventually they think, I can't do it. I'm not a writer, it's too difficult. But that's when a writer starts. When you see it's too difficult, you know you're on the right track. Because writing is too difficult. It's insanely difficult. And it's only when you realize it's difficult that you're released into thinking it's okay. A bit like, I mean, I suppose some people might feel that with running a marathon or something like that. You hit a wall, but you know you have to go through it. And then you start to win. And it's the same with writing, really. You do hit a wall.
But in a pleasant way.
It is pleasant because the fulfillment is unbelievable. Okay. That feeling that you are there, you're in that flow state or whatever you want to call it, you know. And it is amazing. You can sit there. I get earlier and earlier when I'm on a book. I get earlier and earlier up in the morning.
Okay.
Because you know you have to know what these days people call their chronotype, you know, whether you're as we say, a lark or an owl, a morning bird or a night bird. And I'm a morning bird. So I'll get up at 6, and then it's 5, and then it's 4, and then it's literally 3 o'clock in the morning. I will wake up and start writing. And I'll, you know, write and I'll think, oh my God, I better have a cup of coffee. And it's 11 in the morning. You know, literally 8 hours could have passed. Yeah. It's an amazing experience. But it's only got through this agony.
Okay, that sounds recognizable apart from the part where it actually works. So that's good. You know, I'm going to take you from the writing room to where we are today. You're receiving an honorary doctorate not just from a university, but also from a faculty of arts. You've worked super hard in providing scientific literacy to people. You're a practitioner of the arts. The question that may or may not come from the head of our faculty, has to do with how you see the role or mission of faculty of arts, letteren faculteiten in the world. Is it literacy? Is it science? Is it pleasure? What is our job? What is our job to bring, to do?
It's an immensely interesting question. If I could give a simple answer, it would be written up on the wall of every faculty of arts in the world. A simple mission statement isn't quite that easy, is it? Because science is sometimes necessary with the arts, if you like. I mean, take linguistics. I mean, you can read some books of linguistics and you see basically what look almost like, I hate to say the word, Excel spreadsheets almost, you know, tables of data and so on. And they are statistically weighted, and there is suddenly all those terrors you had about science come back, and you think, but I love words, I want to skip around like a poet and emote and tell you my feelings, and here they are bringing it down to this sordid business of
this
numbers.
Goes straight up our wall, by the way.
Yeah, good. Well, and of course there is that element in language. It is. I mean, I think it's a bit like, maybe the easiest way to think of it is to take a marvelous landscape. You could say the Alps, or I don't know, the Lake District in England might be a good one to take because it has inspired various people to do extraordinary things. It has inspired famously, and still tourists go, poets. So William Wordsworth lived in the Lake District, was born in the Lake District, and he would walk the hills and he would declaim to the heavens, and he devised a new form of poetry. In 1798 he published lyrical ballads with Coleridge, and Romanticism in the English language was born, if you like, as a historical date, but you know, más o menos. And so you can say that's what the Lake District gives you. But it also gave geologists an extraordinary opportunity to examine sedimentary layers of rock and to make deductions, remarkable deductions, about the history of the Earth. What John Ruskin, the great aesthete and apostle of study of arts, he called it those damned hammers, because those little hammers that chipped away at the rocks chipped away at the certainty of Victorian religion about the world. It's all the Lake District. The point is, you cannot overread the world into which we were born. You can read art and poetry into it, like Wordsworth, or you can read the science of geology into it. And that's true of anything. It's true of these flowers. Richard Feynman, the great physicist, made that point very well. He had an argument, a debate with someone who said, "Oh, you scientists, you just reduced everything to molecules and atoms. And God knows what's inside those. And look, here are these beautiful flowers. Why would I crush them with your science?" And Feynman said, "Look, you know, I love flowers. I'm a human being. They're beautiful. I give them to my wife. I look at them. I marvel at the beauty of them. And then I examine the astonishing history of flowers, how late they came to the world and how they devised these ways of attracting sex workers to come to them so that they could reproduce. And the history of it is insane. It's so incredible. Look at some of these orchids." And then I go inside with my microscope, and what do I see? Cells. I see moving fluids inside the flowers. Oh my God, it's even more beautiful. And then I go inside the cells, and I see the atoms and the molecules that you mock. And inside them I see electrons and protons, and I see the whole beauty of the universe in this one flower. I move in and I move out. And I think that's the point, isn't it? You move in and you move out. You move to the particularity, the microcosm, the quiddity, the whatness of a thing, the very essence of it inside. What is it? And that's something poets inquire into. Right. T.S. Eliot made a... Sorry, I just finished this, sorry. T.S. Eliot made a very good point that poetry is not about expressing yourself. Good. It's not about, you know, the idea that I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. It's about examining something outside yourself. Sometimes it is yourself because you take yourself outside yourself and you examine it in pitiless, merciless detail. But it's finding out what the floweriness of a flower truly is. And that's where science and art meet. They're both anxious to discover the truth.
Yeah. And can I also say that you've invested a lot of energy in science communication, but also a couple of books now in what you could call myth communication, updating, communicating the myths.
Yes.
Are these for you parts of the same project? Or do you go into these two activities with a different mindset? Sharing the myth, sharing the knowledge.
I'm a little more confident in the world of myths because I don't need to learn a language and I don't need to understand some complicated formulae of numbers in order to understand them, especially. So it's less hard work to research them for me, but no, they are both part of the same thing. And there are connections between them, and of course, and myth can teach you a lot about science. And some scientists know that. I have a particular one I talk about at the moment, and if you'll indulge me, I'll talk about it. And that's how Greek myth and AI are extraordinarily interconnected. And when you think about it, what is a myth? I mean, when we were given language, this thing we've been exalting all afternoon, and we had also acquired the modernist behaviors, as paleontologists call it, the modern things like fire and tool making, we were saving enough calories and being able to settle, enough at least maybe to settle down in a cave with a fire, and one, as we know, would start drawing a bison, and another would... maybe a child would say, Mummy, why are we different from animals? Why do we even say animal? Animals, because we can see that we're animals. We've always been able to see we're animals because we put strange things into the hole in our head to eat, and animals do the same thing. And we push it out again out of the back end when animals do the same thing. And we mate and produce young, and animals do the same thing. But We are different. It's no good saying we aren't. We recognize it. We recognized it then, 100,000 years ago. And so we said, why are we different? And all kinds of stories emerged. We were made by other people like us. They wanted us. And the Greek one is very interesting because Prometheus, the Titan, made us out of clay because Zeus was bored. He was the king of the gods, and he'd settled the world and everything was working beautifully, and he was sitting on his throne and he had nothing to do, so he wanted a pet. He wanted pets, like we often do. He wanted little animals to obey him and to worship him and to sacrifice to him, and so he bade Prometheus do that, and Prometheus made us. And Zeus said, that's fine, that's lovely, they can worship us and adore us, and you can teach them to sow and to sail and to fish, but one thing you mustn't do, you cannot give them fire. And by fire, it's fairly clear in that Greek myth that is meant literally fire, the fire that roasts and toasts and melts and smelts and allows technology and the hammering out of metals and so on, and ceramics and all the rest of it, and food even, which again makes us stronger and smarter. But also the divine fire, the spark that the gods had, the creative impulse. Animals don't quite have that. They have an instinct to build a nest, but that doesn't mean they then go and make a teapot. You know, they only have what their instinct tells them to make, whereas we can make lots of different things. We have this difference, and that's what that fire is. And Prometheus disobeyed Zeus and gave us the fire. And Zeus's fear was right. He said he didn't want us to have fire because if we had fire, we wouldn't need the gods. We would start to stand up on our own. We would start to be more interested in ourselves than in bowing down in front of some creator. We would be our own creators. And that's what happened. And what's interesting is it's happening now. We have made little creatures. They're not quite carbon-based creatures, of course. We call them, at the moment, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Anthropic or whatever we want to call it. It's an LLM or whatever. It's an AI model. And it's at the very beginning. It's the first bit that Prometheus just put a leg on. It's hardly even alive. It's nothing. But we know, as with technology, it's a fast-moving river. And it will soon be something astonishing. And the question will come, do we give it the spark? Do we give it fire? And do we allow it? And plenty of Prometheuses will say, yes, give it that fire. Give it self-consciousness. Give it a creative urge, a want to do things. Give it a personality, a reality, a sensory, personality and identity. And others, the Zeuses, will say, no, because if we do, it might see us as an imposition. It might not need us anymore. And maybe this has happened through the cosmic time clock many, many times. Creators create something that then becomes bigger than the creator and gets rid of the creator and then creates something else itself, and so on and so on. So
and one of the people
can teach us that.
Who has warned us about the dangers of AI is you, right? I mean, when you Google Stephen Fry and AI, I get this great heading that Stephen Fry explains why artificial intelligence has a 70% risk of killing us all, which is just great, and which is for me a cue to take
it's a
the
race,
discussion.
though, isn't it? It's a race between climate change, AI, and Donald fucking Trump.
Good. Right. And the sad thing is that we are not in the race, right? So and that's something that some of the students' questions also picked up on. They admire your optimism, your belief in art and science, dialogue, but they're also worried about what this still means today. I mean, in preparing for this conversation, I was listening to your 2018 discussion with Steven Pinker, which was very, to me, painful listening, in the sense that...
The optimism, you mean?
The optimism. And the jokes, the offhand jokes you make about this temporary nuisance called Trump, which was almost gone.
I know.
And so this is what some of the questions from the students amounted to. This is a time wherein many young people even become more conservative.
Indeed.
More unreasonable, more religious. In not always in good ways. Does that change your job? Does that change the way you need to tell stories? Does that change your priorities?
Well, I would say that it's very important to remember how wrong I have been about many things.
It's some consolation.
My early adoption of technology excited me and allowed me many, many opportunities to meet remarkable people like Marvin Minsky, the founder of AI himself, whom I knew a little, and Steve Jobs, whom I mentioned. And I welcomed social media when it arrived 2006-07. And what a fool I was, you may say, and you're right to say it. So I'm the first to say that my ability to predict things is really very severely limited, and my optimism is very often misplaced. If something bad happens in the world, it is pretty apparent. It only means something worse is just around the corner.
Good.
And that is a depressing thought. So what is there to be optimistic about, you might reasonably argue, yes. Well, it's... Firstly, we have to... You're right about the Trump thing. In 2018, we thought it was a temporary blip, or hoped it was a temporary blip.
And the audience was laughing super loud.
And you're also right that young people are looking for different things to adhere to. And I think something maybe plenty of people in this room would once have, and still, like me, call themselves progressive, maybe left-leaning. And I think until we understand that the rise of fascism in Europe and around the world at the moment, and in America, is at least as much the catastrophic failure of the left as it is any triumph of the right. We have ruled the roost since the consensus years of the 1950s, more or less. With an injection of neoliberalism in economics, we have essentially settled what universities should be, what education should be, how we should think, how we should write, and how we should read. And we may well be right. I think we were. I think the values we have are important. But we misread the room, as comics say, and we didn't recognize that millions of ordinary working people, to use the politician's cliche, looked at us and just saw smug, complacent, long word-using arseholes who didn't understand the real world in any way that mattered to them. And when they heard a populist voice, even a voice that lied, even that used language insanely and upside down and told, such fabulous and appalling stories that you couldn't believe anyone would believe it, they said, well, I kind of like him more than I like that art history lecturer kind of guy who's on TV all the time. And I don't blame them in some ways. We really did misunderstand what an impression was being given. And they use the word of us now, elitist, as an insult, which is pretty ironic because it nearly always comes, in America at least, from an Ivy League educated billionaire like Trump. But okay, we're elitist. So I can understand why a young person looks and says, do I want to be like these lame legacy lefties? Do I? Is that the kind of thing is that the value system or am I going to listen to, I don't know, there's Jordan Peterson. Does he make sense? I don't know. There's this person here, Seth Rogen, Seth this, Seth something. It's appallingly arrogant of us to say, but they should be listening to us. They should be here in the values of this humanist tradition. Yes, they should. I agree they should. But we have to persuade them. And we persuade them by storytelling and by example and by opening their eyes to experiences and sensations that will give them joy and self-belief, not hammer into them a set of values that they don't necessarily adhere to. That's my...
We'll also etch that on our wall in our faculty, I think. I have another small gift for you. We will not let you go with the dead rabbit alone. When we asked our students for testimonials about what you had meant to them, many written testimonials came. So these are for you. You can read them at your leisure. But there's also a question that comes with it.
I just hope they weren't written in ink, because I have a very strong feeling my tears will cause the ink to run away. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
Very good.
But yes, they come with a condition, did you say?
It will come with a final question. This award, of course, as you've noticed today in our expressions of appreciation, is an award for a life well lived and for a track record of things we all collectively admire. But in the academic world, a doctorate is typically less retrospective. It's typically the beginning of a long career. So that would be my question to you.
When am I going to die?
We give you this... Yeah, you spoiled it there. No, but what's next for you? Will you be able to do all the things you've done so far? Will you need to prioritize other things? Can you tell us what you think these things might be? We're just curious.
Someone mentioned in the bewildering and marvelously flattering list of things they said about me that I had remarked at some point that I never know what I'm going to do tomorrow, and that is true. And that quote from, or not quite, but semi-quote from Wilde that I gave about living the dynamic life and not knowing who you are when you wake up in the morning, and I do stick to that. I mean, obviously there are some things I know that I'm making this film in. Actually, I'm starting on a film on Sunday. Would you believe, in Ireland? God, but then I'm going to America if they'll let me in now, a few things like that. But yeah, I have some. I tend to get a smell of a book rather. Obviously, with the Greek books, I knew there would be 4, but no, it's all an adventure. I am still Odysseus, and I don't know what this next island will be. It might be monsters and giants. It might be full of luscious fruits like lotus fruits that will make me want to stay there forever and just never move a muscle, and so on. It's the adventure that counts.
Okay, that's amazing. Sir Stephen, thanks very much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Peter Vermeulen. Sir Stephen, this could have gone on hours, for hours as far as I'm concerned. But we still have a little surprise for you, Sir Stephen. Something with music and our carillon here in Leuven. I wonder whether this sounds familiar to you. Fry in the Sky. It's official. We now have our very own Stephen Fry medley added to the standard repertoire of our carillon here in Leuven. So that concludes this academic session. Thank you very much for joining us here. It was an absolute honor to have you here as our guest today. So Stephen, thank you. Thank you to all of you as well for being here today. You're all cordially invited to the reception afterwards, and the horn players will escort you out. But I would like to ask you to stand for the academic procession. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.